Welcome to the Embodiment Podcast. This show is for you if you see the body as more than a brain taxi. It's for people interested in coming home to the body as a holistic aspect of who we are and how we live. Episodes contain practical tips, exercises you can take away, and interviews with embodiment specialists from around the world. I'm your host, Mark Walsh. So on the show today, Curtis Watkins. So Curtis is an old colleague of mine. He's been coaching with the body for over 30 years, which is a long time to be in coaching. If you don't know what coaching is, we're going to get into that. His background in coaching, if you do know about coaching, is things like he's a master certified coach with the ICF, certified ontological coach with the Newfield network, which is where I met him. He was my coach there. He's a certified master somatic coach with the Strozz Institute. He's got all kinds of other coaching qualifications, and he's also a trained actor in a past life, as his website says. So, Curtis, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here. It's good to see you, Mark.
It's nice to see you again. It's been too long. And what was the beginning of your journey with the body, Curtis?
So I could put the beginning back to grade school when I was the kid who was always picked last for teams. And, there was a lot of, because I was awkward and heavy and, frankly, not good at team games. And so I can understand why I would get picked last, but that led to a deep shaming that I embodied for the longest time. And it was really the process of healing that shame that had me look at embodiment and the body. And so that was the beginning of it. The conscious beginning of it was probably more when I began studying ontological coaching, and the three aspects that we focused on were language, body, and emotion. So that's when I consciously began to use the body as a area of care and wisdom and learning and all those kind of things. So
excellent. It strikes me that school sports is just such a bad experience for so many people. Like, often people look to kind of romantic, stuff around body image, around sexuality, but it actually begins before that, doesn't it? It begins you're at school and you're the skinny kid or the fat kid or the lanky tall kid or the short one or whatever. And, this is a real kind of humiliation process that can go with that. And so many of the guests that have come on the show have said, I wasn't good at sports as a kid. And it's just interesting to hear so many of them say that.
Yeah, it's and for that reason, I just said, okay, well, I'm out in terms of the sports domain. And so then I really focused on, being the intellect. And, and so I miss out on a huge territory. Yeah. And unless you're good, the coaches are, at least the coaches I had, there's just like, they give people like me something to occupy me for the hour that I'm in gym class, right? While they focus on their superstars that they want to develop. And I understand that as a human thing. You want to be successful. And, but in terms of how it develops me somatically as a human being, it's like, yikes.
And I think so many people had that similar experience where they just made the choice of saying, the body isn't my domain, as you put it. The body isn't my area. That's not what I do. And, I was in the kind of top set at school around all the clever kids, and most of them didn't do sports because it was like, that's not what we do. We're the clever kids and we don't do the body thing. And what that's done as a society is sort of ensured that our leadership, politically, business-wise, intellectually, is the people that said no to the body at a very young age. It's almost like a selection process. So I just want to underline that because I've heard it so many times with guests, and there's a real pain around it for people. And I want to kind of sort of say, that's not nothing.
Yeah, and it's funny because I think I'm the only one. Mm-hmm. Even though, it's a really common, the more I'm in the world, the more I realize that I'm not the only one. But the wound is one that, thinks that, I'm the only one that's got this suffering going on. It's really interesting because back in the 1800s, right, you were chosen as a leader based on your calf size, the size of your calf, and how tall you were. So it's like, I'm not saying that's a better criteria for leadership than what we have now, but at least it was somatically based. I don't know if the criteria had any basis in reality, but, George Washington was really tall and he had nicely shaped calves from what I hear.
Well, if you meet, there's public schools, state schools and fee-paying schools don't play each other at rugby in the UK because the fee-paying schools are just so much physically bigger that it just wouldn't be fair. There is a real size difference, and it's not down to malnutrition like it might have been in the 1800s. There is a genetic size difference between the classes that's apparent in the UK that I was, when I went into open tournaments, I was just shocked by this. I was like, these guys are huge. They're monsters. All that's little working class hobbits and looking up at them. And, there's this saying that, Waterloo was won on the playing fields of Eton, in that there's an old model of sports where it was regarded as a leadership training. So Britain invented football and rugby and most of the sports, which America then obviously ruined and changed into, ghastly versions of. But though they were originally looked at as character training, essentially like a dojo, though I think that idea has almost been completely lost around the world now. The idea of sports, you still find it in outdoor education, like Outward Bound and things. So before we get on to somatic coaching, and I should say to listeners today, this episode's a little bit different because we're going to talk about coaching, but Curtis has already agreed to coach me as well. So we're actually going to be doing a bit of a demo later on. So I'm just going to say to listeners that's coming up. And before we get into that, can you talk a little bit about acting? Because I know you have a solid kind of acting training, and that's hugely somatic as well, right?
Yeah. So when you asked me where did I begin my awareness around the body, now that you mentioned that, for sure, that's being on stage is where you really get a sense of your personal space as well as the space of others. And theater was a great arena for listening, and not only having to listen to your fellow actors, but also listen to what's going on inside. And so it was and also emotional. Well, they didn't call it emotional intelligence back when I was in high school, but emotional awareness is like the character that I was playing or that I was on stage had to have an emotional presence. Otherwise, it would just be this one-dimensional cardboard cutout on stage. So, the emotions and the body definitely play a huge part in theater and acting in general, for sure.
I mean, it's just not convincing to people, is it? If you're playing a role and you're not inhabiting that role, it's just people look at it and go, "Okay, you're just pretending." I'm not convinced of.
Exactly. They don't know exactly what's wrong, but they know something's wrong.
It feels off.
I'm just not connecting to this character. I really don't care about them or whatever. That's usually because they're not. They memorize the words and they're standing where they should stand.
Yeah.
But there's no life in the body.
You're working with presence, emotions, awareness, and it's quite funny. I've got friends are actors. A couple of my good colleagues are actors, and occasionally if they've been doing a big theater and then you have dinner with them, they forget to turn it off. And they're either slightly in character or they're like, projecting across the room. And they realize they're not speaking to 200 people anymore. I as a trainer, I sometimes have a similar thing. It's a performance in a way training. And I've been quite impressed with the level of sophistication, like Rachel Blackman we had on the show, my colleague Francis Bryars. Like, these are people that really know about acting, with proper acting trained, like you. And I was quite impressed by the level of somatic sophistication they were bringing from there.
Yeah, if they got good training, absolutely. I mean, Laurence Olivier tells a famous story about making the transition from theater to film. And the first time he saw himself on film, he was just appalled at how broad and loud and He just had to bring it down like 95% from what he was used to doing in the theater. Yeah. And it was a huge shift for him. But if you watch any of his films, boy, did he master that. Yeah.
And I just offer that to listeners as an exercise, because we kind of like to offer things out, is to like notice next time you're speaking, like how much space are you filling? Are you actually reaching the person on the other side of the board table? Are you actually going far past them and, taking way more? I find this sometimes a bit weird doing interviews, because on the one hand, you look like you're next to me, but on the other hand, you're across the world. And sometimes it's kind of like, it's not the same natural kind of calibration than when someone's in the room. I just offer that out to listeners to play with that, to play with being a bit smaller than needed or being a bit bigger. I think it's quite a fun experiment.
Yeah, especially, working with teams. Working with the ones that are almost always talking to not talk, or to talk more softly, and working with the ones who tend to process internally rather than verbally, how to bring them out more without violating their sense of self. It's like, well, I'll talk when I'm ready to talk. As long as you've got people that are occupying all the airspace, you never hear from them, and oftentimes, well, more often than not, what they have to contribute is incredibly valuable to whatever the conversation is. So, yeah, it comes back to what's too much and what's not enough. Right? Always. Yeah.
I think, does that come from Strozz, that question? It's, what's too much, what's too little? And it's such a profound question. It's deceptively simple as a question, isn't it? Like, is this too much right now? Is this too little?
Yeah.
The devil's in the dose.
So many things. It's not just vocal production, but am I too close? Am I too far?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
As a coach, am I challenging too much, not enough?
Yeah. And it's like, how to be myself, right? As a leader, when working as a coach, it's like, I want them to be themselves. I really dislike the, we did this 360 survey and we've done a gap analysis, and based on this gap analysis, you need to develop this, and this. And it's like, well, okay, maybe. However, how do we develop this person into being the best person, best leader, or best person this person could be, is really more where I feel comfortable in coaching people. Mm-hmm. Is let's develop what we have, rather than trying to dig up some competency that, we could spend 20 years developing it, but at the end, it's only going to be a shadow of what someone who really has a knack for that would develop into. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, for me, I think we need to follow our strengths as well as look for the gaps in things. There can be this in personal growth and corporate world. There can be this like looking for the gaps all the time, and actually not going, okay, who is this person? What do they want to blossom into? Rather than trying to turn an oak seed into a pine tree or vice versa. It's like, what is the actual potential here? And for me, there's always this dance in my embodied practice between going with what I'm strong and love, and fully expressing that, and also just kind of like at least having hygiene level with the other things. Like that's my kind of, I feel like you kind of need a bit of both,
Yeah. You have to be at least have a basic level of competence in the other areas. That's what I hear you saying. Is that?
Yeah, like for example, I'm not a great listener. One of the podcast things for me is learning to listen better. That's part of my practice of interviewing people. And I'm probably never going to be like a counselor is good at that. But if I can't listen at all, I'm fucked. Like as a leader, that's a skill I absolutely have to at least a sort of 5 out of 10. Yeah. So for me, there's a real sense of, okay, to run my relationship, to run my business, I need that good enough. And then there's other things like being, I don't know, fiery, creatively fiery, that I could get really well class at. So I want to be developing those areas too. So for me, that's the balance. Listen, Curtis, we haven't defined coaching yet. And this might sound crazy, but coaching in some places is not that well known. And the audience are from all around the world. Now, you've been doing coaching almost as long as I've been alive. And the field hasn't been around much longer than you as a field. So maybe we could start by sort of saying what coaching is as you understand it.
Sure. Yeah. So my understanding of coaching is being with another person in a conversation that will allow what wants to emerge in a safe container, and partnering with that person in accomplishing what it is that they already know they want to accomplish. But more importantly, in my experience, it's letting emerge what they weren't even aware of wanting. Or it might have been this really small, quiet voice in the background. And then working with that person to develop what emerges into either a competency or a skill or a way of being, an ease. You mentioned Strozz. So at the Strozz Institute, they talk about perturbing that which is comfortable and soothing that which is perturbed. And that's not like a blanket every time, always, with everything. However, oftentimes where I'm most comfortable is what needs a little poke, if you will. You were saying, where do I, what's the line between too much challenge and too little challenge?
Yeah, I have an urge to poke. I can understand that one. So I want to get even clearer for listeners. So coaching is not, what it's not is quite helpful, right? So it's not therapy. We're not kind of talking about your parents and analyzing. It tends to be future focused and on, okay, what can we actually do to change things, though it can go very deep. It's not telling people what to do, right? It's not teaching. It's usually asking questions. Coaches are I've trained thousands of coaches in embodiment now, and coaches are notorious for asking questions. Anything else, and a little bit just in terms of, maybe where it comes from as well. Like it came out of sports, right? That certain sports coaches said, I can get a better golf swing not by telling them what to do, but by having the client asking them good questions about their swing, and they can, it's this humanistic perspective of clients learn for themselves rather than needing to be told. Is this all sort of your understanding of it so far?
Yes. Well, being an anti-sports person, I don't attribute it to sports, but for sure.
But that's historically where it came from, like golf and tennis, right?
Yeah, for sure. And the ontological coaching, however, came from a linguistic path.
Uh-huh.
So, now that you bring it up, I see there's no accident why I would be trained in that branch of coaching. So yeah, Fernando Flores, in my understanding, was the father or grandfather or whatever you want to say around ontological coaching, and he developed that by working through the linguistic stuff that Searle and Austin were developing in Stanford University, back in the 60s and 70s, and but yeah, that's the lineage that I attribute coaching to. And for sure, the sports coaching world definitely was about coaching way before we were doing executive coaching or life coaching or anything like that.
I think it was that sort of people realized the technique in sports, and then people went, well, hang on a minute, we could apply this to business, to life coaching, to now you have, parenting coaching, or, for anything that, dating coaching, applying this basic technique of asking good questions and listening deeply rather than telling people stuff. And, the ontological meaning being, study of beings for listeners out there. I only know the word because I trained in Newfield, I have to admit. And this idea to me was a bit deeper, because some coaching is a little bit tricks and tips, isn't it? It's a little bit like, okay, so let's map out how you spend your time and what percentage could you put here. It's kind of, and that's fine. There's a certain level of operation that really works well for, I find, in coaching. Certain people love that. Though an ontological approach goes a bit deeper, doesn't it? Because it's concerning who someone is, their being.
Yes, for sure. So there's room for all of it, and in terms of sports, and you can set me straight here if I'm off on this. Oftentimes, the credibility of the coach was based on past performance. So the coach of the basketball team used to play basketball, and the coach of the football team was the quarterback, or there was that lineage of credibility. And that's the difference between consulting and coaching, is that a consultant is somebody that you go to because they have expertise in a certain domain. If you come to me for coaching, I may not have any experience at all in whatever it is that you're wanting to be coached on. What I have is I see the world, and what every coach has if they're trained in this way, is I see the world differently than you do. We all see the world differently than each other. And so I can see things that you can't, so I can bring a different perspective to whatever it is that you're wrestling with at the time. And I think that's a little bit different than coach sports coaching. Mm-hmm. But anyway,
and as I understand it, the best sports coaches are actually ones who weren't great performers. They tend to be the ones who were mediocre performers who had to sort of learn it the hard way. So like most sort of top British football managers, for example, were players, but they weren't players at the highest level, which is it's quite interesting. It's kind of evolved that way because they could then explain things, rather than the naturals, your Ronaldos and your people like the Messis. They're never going to be great managers because it's just too easy for them.
Yeah, the other ones had to figure it out. Yeah.
Okay, so one might say, okay, so I get it, different perspectives, helping people see things fresh, things from another point of view. That all sounds very cognitive. So how does I'm playing devil's advocate here, of course. So how does
what, you? I'm shocked.
What? So how does the body come into this?
So, there's a couple of basic tenets around somatics, and one is nothing happens without the body. There's no thought, there's no emotions, there's no nothing, without the body. And the second one is that everything that's ever happened to you is registered in the body. And so there's body memory of that shaming that happened to me when I was continually picked last in grade school, let's say. And so if I only address it from a cognitive point of view, I'll have a better understanding. I might even have some aha moments. But my experience, Mark, and I venture to say that you've had similar experiences in your vast working with coaches and clients, that the real freedom and learning occurs when the body gets it.
Yeah, that's where the rubber hits the road, isn't it? The body is always present. As Claire Meyer, mutual friend, I think, says, wherever you go, there you are. The body's always there. I think she took that from someone else. So whatever's happening, the body is involved. But also, it's not just involved as a side issue. That's the deepest cut. That's the thing that if you don't change is going to undermine your efforts. Having learned something cognitively, that is it Wendy that says the body always wins. The body's just going to undermine whatever you're working on if it's not included. So for any change effort to be successful, it needs to include that reality.
Absolutely. And now neuroscience is backing this up big time. It's like if you don't create a new neural pathway for whatever it is that you're wanting to create, it's not going to happen.
Yeah,
you're going to default back to whatever it is you've practiced the most. And by practice, that's every time you practice it, the brain makes that connection, that neural pathway. The more you practice it, the deeper the groove gets. And until you create a new groove and practice it a lot, you're going to default to what you practice the most.
Yeah. Habit, right? Bureaucracy of habit, as Stuart Heller says. And again, I'd offer that out to listeners just to say, like, hey, what are you practicing now as you walk down the street in New York, or you kind of sit in the park in Sydney listening to this? Like, what are you practicing? Because you're practicing something. One neural pathway right now is getting deeper in your, how you listen, not just how you stand or walk, though including that, how is your being entrained right now, is being ingrained. You're like a piece of wood that you're carving a line in. And it just, that's always going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And, so for me, I want to develop practices that are welcoming. And as you talked about, listening, deeply accepting, and understanding and expressing whatever it is that's there. There's life is wonderful, and sometimes it really hurts like shit. And for the longest time, I thought, well, if I could just find a way to have a shit-free life, then everything would be great. And what I realized is that, wait a second, let me see if I can actually engage with this painful stuff in a welcoming, loving, understanding way, to befriend it and see what's there. And that's changed everything.
It sounds like kind of very Buddhist kind of understanding. I know you're a Dharma practitioner like myself, and as you say, like one of the sort of Western approach to pain is to try and get rid of it. And another approach to pain, which is like, okay, how do we accept, old age, disease, suffering is only gonna, we're getting older, Curtis, it's shit's only gonna get worse. And it's like, so our attitude better get better. Our embodied acceptance of that, our being with that, is the part that we can work with, and not just trying to control the entire world to fit my nervous. It's like you can change your own nervous system or the entire world to fit it, right? Like, which is easier?
Yeah, good luck with the other one. Yeah. And so, and there's lots of modalities. I don't want to take away from therapy or counseling or teaching or any of that kind of stuff. They're all valid, right? And for me, it's which one has the greatest leverage. And I landed in coaching, and it's developing with my clients an attitude of acceptance and curiosity, which is so anathema to most of the Western world. It's, if I don't understand it, then it's got to be wrong. And so when my clients are coming to me, that's one of my key criteria in accepting clients is, are they curious?
Yeah.
If they're not curious about themselves and what's going on, then we're not going to be very successful in what we do. And it reminds me, it's funny, when HR departments hire me, I have to have a conversation with them and make sure that they're okay with it before we go forward, because I say, about 80 to 85% of the people that I work with in organizations leave within a year of their working with me. Are you okay with that?
Wow. Yeah, because they realize something's going on that wasn't in their awareness, and they go, hey, is this the place for me?
Yeah, exactly. And it reminds me of the CFO. This is just a story. It's not a
chief financial officer
talking to the CEO and saying, well, what if we invest all this time in developing our people and then they leave? And the CEO says, well, what if we don't develop our people and they stay? So I think that's really the point in terms of business. It's like, yeah, you want to develop your people. If they leave, great, right? You want people to be successful. You want people to move on. At least I do. It's like, do I want to keep somebody here and have them be miserable? Not really.
Yeah. And what I love about coaching is just eminently practical. You know, I've had coaching from a number of people, which I think is good for any, you know, I do coach somatic coaching on Skype fairly regularly. I always have 1 or 2 clients on Skype. And I've taught a lot of coaches, and I like the practicality of coaching. It's not let's talk endlessly about our feelings. It's actually it may go to the emotional domain, but it's eminently pragmatic. Just talking of practicality, before I forget, I want to the Coaches Rising podcast. For listeners out there who are curious about coaching, particularly from a body point of view, I want to really recommend the Coaches Rising podcast. My friend Joel runs it, and they have some great guests, most of whom are body informed. So I just want to if you're newer to coaching and you're interested in coaching, that's another one I'd recommend. In terms of the sort of toolkit, Curtis, how specifically do you bring the body in to coaching? We're going to do a demo shortly, but let's lay out some of the tools you might use, because you're sitting there, you're the coach, you're on Skype or in person. You say, hey, what do you want to talk about today? And they say, I don't know, I'm stressed at work. What are some of the toolkits you could use?
Yeah, so the first one is breath. And having the client become aware of their breath is probably the most basic, but also the most leveraging piece around somatics that I've ever found. It's because if they're holding their breath, if I'm holding my breath, I'm not as present as if I'm breathing. And if my breath is way up in my chest, what is that making me more or less available? So it's breath, and then back to what's too much and what's too little. Where are they breathing? And how are they breathing? So for a coach to be able to begin to make those distinctions, be able to observe those distinctions in their clients is really important for a somatic coach, you know?
Yeah.
And it's one of the basic practices that I give almost every single one of my clients is a breathing practice.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something we all do. And like you said, we're always practicing something. So what kind of breathing are you practicing?
Yeah.
And so that's tool number one. Tool number two is, are they open or closed?
So real simple somatic distinction they can work with, right? They don't have to be a super expert, because everyone's got a felt sense of that, right? Everyone goes, okay, I'm closed today, or I'm open because it's a beautiful day. Like, that's something people can just get. And then as a manager, be like, oh, I'm pretty open to a feedback right now, or actually I'm not. Now's not a good time, or maybe I need to regulate.
It's really, really basic. And, if you don't like open or closed, you can use, am I holding or tight?
Yeah.
Right? Or am I relaxed? And I don't mean relaxed like a wet noodle relaxed. I just mean not holding anything that doesn't need to be held. In other words, if I want to sit up straight, I have to hold certain muscles to allow that to happen, but not more than that. So it's for the longest time, and I'm still probably doing it. My shoulders would rise up on their own, and working to let that go has been profound in terms of what came up for me around why my shoulders were coming up like that.
Yeah.
And so you can watch people's shoulders, you can watch people's jaw lines in terms of what's tightening, what's relaxed. Their eyes, are their eyes tight? It's their tongues. You can just one of the favorite exercises is just start at the top of the head and ask them to become aware of every little aspect of their body, and if it's tight, let it go.
And Curtis, sometimes it's so simple. I just might say, how are you doing in your body? Like, how are you doing today? Like, what are you feeling? And that can open up a whole conversation. Or like, hey, what do you do with your body when you talk about that person in HR that you hate? And, real simple stuff for people that don't have a big body background. I basically map this 4 skills for coaches and 4 skills for clients with the same skills: awareness and choice, self, and others. So it's, I'm aware of myself as a coach, right? We haven't talked about that side. Like, am I as a coach leaning forwards when that might not be helpful? Am I self-regulated? Like, for me, I just do a quick centering before I go on a call, because often I'm carrying stuff for the rest of my life, or, wake myself up or calm myself down. Can I observe the coachee, that observing skill? And then can I actually impact and influence them emotionally in a way which may better help them with their questions? Like, they're the 4 skills that I see as a coach. And then I'm teaching those skills to the client too, usually at a much simpler level, but like helping them self-regulate, helping them observe their colleagues a little bit, helping them be a bit more impactful, charismatic, if that's, leadership's part of it. And I find it helpful to kind of break it down into those 4 skill sets.
Yeah, that's great. Very helpful, for sure.
And the centering is a big one. I remember when I used to teach at Newfield, me and you used to teach together, and Newfield I still regard as one of the sort of premier coach trainings around, one of the deeper ones. And along with integral coaching, I hear very good things from a lot of their students. Come to me. CTI in the UK, if you're interested in coach training, because I see the students from all the different schools, and what I notice is some consistently impress me and others don't. There's some real Mickey Mouse schools that train in a weekend. The ones from Strozz are nearly always good. The CTI guys have a little bit of body, but very good basics. The integral coaching guys are normally good. And at Newfield, as we were teaching there, I used to see again and again and again, people would say, coaching, it's just centering has utterly changed my coaching. Even just learning that tool, because me and you would only have like an hour and a half every day, like. You know what I mean? It wasn't a somatic coaching program. We just had this short slot, and we teach like basics, distinctions of, dispositions, archetypes. But the centering was the thing I consistently heard from coaches that really changed their coaching.
Yeah, absolutely. That's another fundamental practice. And as long as we're mentioning schools, I would be remiss if I didn't mention New Ventures West.
Mm-hmm.
James Flaherty was one of Fernando Flores' promoters, I would say. He wasn't ever really a student of his, but he traded Rolfing for Fernando's knowledge of ontology, is my understanding. I could have it totally wrong. So if I do, James, I apologize. But anyway, that's my memory of the lineage. But beside the point, New Ventures West is an excellent coaching school.
Mm-hmm.
It's top tier and covers all the bases. It's
Yeah, I wanted to put a few good schools out there because I know people will listen to this and get interested, and they can watch my YouTube videos for like specific examples of some of these things as well. You just put in body coaching, but also there's a lot of, sometimes there's a lot of coaches out there now, and not all of them are well trained, because you can get trained in a couple of weekends. So I think it's worth sort of pointing out some of the people that are doing this well in Europe and America. Okay, so let's do a bit of a demo, Curtis. So this is a new thing for the show. I was thinking, because you do a lot of Skype coaching anyway, and coaching is one of those things that's kind of hard to explain but easy to show. And I thought, we could get a coachee on. And then I thought, no, I'll take the opportunity, because you're an amazing coach, to get a bit of coaching. I thought this would be, I was noticing this morning, I felt a little bit vulnerable, a little bit scared about this, because I was thinking, God, this is a pretty personal thing to do. I've never had public coaching before. All my coaching with you and a dozen other coaches has been in private. So we had a little talk about it, and we thought about a potential couple of subjects. So normally there'd be like confidentiality agreement at this point, but that's out the fucking window, because it's live. But I thought, you know what, I'll for my benefit and also for listeners, I'll jump in there. So still up for doing sort of 20, 25 minutes of coaching?
Sure. Yeah. So you just answered my first question. Is like, how much time do we have? Yeah,
Maximum
absolutely.
25 minutes. Yeah.
And I just want to make sure that your listeners understand that you can do somatic coaching without seeing the person. I do a lot of telephone coaching, and in many instances, I prefer doing telephone coaching to Skype or Zoom coaching, in that oftentimes there is a greater element of safety for the client when they are not being observed. And this comes down to quantum physics. When you are being observed, the interchange changes through the observation. So I just want to make sure that for those people out there listening, go, well, I don't really use Skype. You don't need to use Skype.
Yeah.
You can use the telephone.
Great for hearing breath as well, isn't it? Like with an earpiece in, you can hear, it's really intimate. You can really hear someone's breathing.
You can hear their breathing, and it sounds woo-woo, and it is woo-woo. You talked about self-referencing and being aware of yourself as a coach, and also being aware of your coachee. And the instrument of my body oftentimes informs me what's going on with the client, and then I can ask the client. So in other words, if I feel a constriction in my chest, I can say something like, Mark, I just noticed my chest kind of tighten up, and I'm just wondering, was there something going on over there for you? Now, in some regards, that might be a little bit leading, but oftentimes they go, yeah, actually, I just did notice my chest close. So don't be afraid of using your body as a coaching instrument, because it's an amazing source and I don't know how it can work 3,000 miles away like it does, but it does. So if it's all right with you, I am going to turn off my video.
Okay, I'll do the same.
So that now I can be more fully present to myself and to your voice. And what would you like to work on?
We discussed a couple of things earlier, but let me kind of just check in with myself, like what's most alive now, because I want this to be something real but not massively exposing.
Yeah, for sure. What's alive now, for sure?
There is, for me, one of my biggest tendencies is doing too much, like doing more than is healthy and cramming too much in a day. My secretary the other day just said, your calendar has got insane in the 2 years that she's been working for me. And there's a way in which, like, I can take breaks from that, like going on holiday or going on retreat. But I'm keen trying to understand what's going on with that kind of self-brutalizing almost.
Yeah. Interesting that language, self-brutalizing. That's really, in my listening, very harsh. So am I hearing that you're seeing the price that you're paying now, whereas you didn't before?
Yeah, I'm really aware. That's why I use such harsh language. I'm really aware how unsustainable it can be, and also just how unkind it is. I'm aware that it leads me to be unpleasant to others because I'm just going at that pace where the kindness kind of goes for self and other. And also it just feels like not something I want to keep doing. And I do my meditation, I go to my yoga, I do all the good stuff. And there's still this like something going on with just filling my diary with stuff, because it's not like I'm desperate for the money or anything,
Yeah, I'm just noticing that sadness came up for me as I was just listening to you, Mark, and I'm just wondering if any emotions came up for you. Yeah,
I think as I noticed this, like, first of all, just naming it to another human being that cares, it's like my friend as well as a coach, I think it's really powerful to actually say that out loud. Like I'm being unkind to myself and that's not okay. I think there's real power. Like I know it's a release in my belly just to say that. Like there's real power in just naming it. And there's also a part of me which is, I think maybe I need to sit with that. I'm trying not to coach myself here, but I'm like to sit with that, like, ouch. Do you know what I mean? Like really get it.
I do.
Because there's an emotion there which at speed I override. And then I get to the end of the day, eat usually far too big a meal, and then go to sleep, have a bath, which I always enjoy at the end of the day. It's kind of restorative. And then go straight to bed and crash out. I'm asleep within 30 seconds. And that's pretty much a normal day for me. And I think I never really have the time to kind of go, whoa, this is not cool.
Yeah, well, you just named it right there. So you said at this speed. Do you remember what you said? At this speed,
Yeah, there isn't the space, the time to feel that, like, the brutality of it. You know, to really go, wow, that's not kind. That's not okay.
Yeah, exactly. So there you have, in my listening, Mark, the why.
I mean, are you going down the line of this sadness I don't want to feel, so I keep moving quick? I mean, I've heard that theory a lot of times. I'm not totally bought into that.
You basically just named that you keep yourself busy, so busy that you don't have time to attend to that brutality or that brutality.
Yeah, I think I'm not feeling the how not okay that is for me, actually, because it's not okay. And if someone were to force me to do it, you know, I'd tell them to bugger off.
Right. Yeah. And
something about self-tyranny comes up here, you know, as I wonder if it's possible to kind of get in touch with because a big value for me is like freedom. And, you know, me, I don't like being told what to do, right? Like I was a pain in the ass, the staff that you've been a member of, and they gave, like for me, there's a value in like not, as a reframing, to frame that as like not tyrannizing myself is very helpful. That's more of a linguistic reframing, but that works.
Yeah. So could we go back to where's your felt sense of this brutalizing when you actually are you in touch with it now?
Well, and it's a bit difficult. So in a way, I feel like we're doing something that's quite kind and spacious and like, you know, paying attention to it. Do you know what I mean? I guess
I talked earlier about befriending,
yeah,
right? These places. So just wondering if you have a sense of where that lands in your body.
Yeah, I mean, I'm aware of the kind of speediness and the tension that can build up when I'm doing it. You know, sometimes I catch myself on the front of my feet, or the shoulders come up, or the tension in the eyes go very narrow. There's somatic pieces to it. And then there's also the piece of sort of exhaustion or sadness around that, which is a different piece. You know, it's like,
yeah,
kind of feeling, you know, if I use the breath to exaggerate it.
Yeah, I'm wondering a different piece, and maybe it's the same, but I'm wondering because for me there's the pain associated with how you're treating yourself that you're coming into recognition of. Am I accurately hearing you?
Yeah, I think that's part of it, and that is more like solar plexus and eyes. There's a kind of heaviness in the face and a kind of hollow feeling in the solar plexus.
Yeah. Which one has the most energy at this moment?
Probably the eyes.
The eyes. Okay. So is it the eyes or above the eyes? It's the actual
around the eyes, so around the sides and underneath the eyes.
Okay. And is there a location that you could be even more specific than the eyes? Is there like a specific spot? If you pay attention to it, you can see it or find it, feel it?
Yeah, there's definitely a spot on both eyes, around the sort of side and just below.
Okay. And so on both of those, is there one that's stronger than the other?
Left's a little bit stronger.
Left's a little bit stronger. So just, if you're willing, just close your eyes, and we're just going to engage in some self-relations. So to engage with this part of you in a conversation. So I want you to just take a couple of deep breaths with the intention of the breath bringing you more in touch with that sensation on your left eye, or the side of your left eye.
Mm-hmm.
And do you have a sense of the size of that sensation there?
Yeah, I'm quite in contact with it.
Is it like the size of a euro coin or a halfpenny? Or
there is more of a kind of, it isn't just like a point. It's not like when you've got a deep visceral gut point. It is a kind of floating feeling around the sides of both eyes that I'm quite in contact with.
Great. Okay. Is there a color?
Not really.
Is there a temperature?
Warm.
Warm. Okay. So it's I want to make sure I'm phrasing this. There's a warm, is it a pulsing? Is that, or wavy? I'm not sure. Can't remember the language you use.
Kind of a heavy, sludgy feeling.
Heavy, sludgy feeling. Okay. Great. Take another deep breath. Heavy, sludgy feeling around both eyes. And you just open up a conversation with this part of you.
Mm-hmm.
And as if you were getting to know someone, you wanted to befriend them. What would you ask them?
What do you need?
Great. And then just wait for the response.
Yeah, rest. It's stupidly simple, but
yeah, exactly.
What I know from somatic work is being in touch with something in that way is quite different from cognitively knowing it.
Yeah. So what happened to your body when you heard the message rest?
Release, a letting go, an opening.
Yeah. Where was that release and the opening?
The belly sensation that I was talking about before, and the face again.
Yeah. So the solar plexus, the belly, the face, and then so what else would you want to ask this part of you to get to know it, or for it to get to know you? So it said rest. Now what?
I'd ask, how can I be kinder?
Might not be words. It could be sensation.
Yeah, kind of sensations change as I ask that.
Uh-huh.
I kind of have the sense it might not be something public as well. Like I'm aware that this is recorded, and it's almost like that the kind of animal body's a little shy to come out on this one.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? When there's that sensation of being a bit too seen.
Yep.
This might be one for me to take into private inquiry.
Absolutely. That's totally fine. So the key here is safety, tenderness, kindness, as you were saying. How can I be more kind? How can I be kinder? And then you've reached this soft spot that, in my opinion, is in all of us. Right? There's this soft spot in us that needs tending to in a kind way, and we can power over it for a long time. But it, like you said earlier in the call, Mark, the body will out. And so I think there's two places here now that we've come to. One was cognitive and one was somatic in regards to this busyness and the brutality of your schedule, that if you were willing to sit with, I think would bear some beautiful fruit that would support you in freeing yourself from this.
Yeah, I mean, for me, what comes up as a practice is kind of next, because I have enough somatic awareness to notice to some extent what's going on. I'm not completely blind to it. And I think there's just something as a practice of actually just really sitting with that and letting it land, because it's this difference between knowing about it cognitively and being like, oh yeah, Curtis, I work too much. And actually sort of sitting with it. And it's like watching a child cry. It's like, okay, you don't want to hit the child again. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm really sorry, like fucking hell, that really impacted you, like, that's what it feels like to me. Like if I'm going to access a kind of behavioral change and like a regret, but like a healthy regret, then there needs to be that like sitting with this like pain of just being with it and being like, wow, fuck,
Yeah, this is the acceptance and the curiosity, right? So can you devote, like, how long have we been doing this? 10 minutes, maybe? Can you give yourself the gift of, you know what? I do want to sit with this part of me in this focused way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I take a lunch break every day pretty much, and I do some yoga or hang out with my wife, for example. And I feel like I could spend the first 5 minutes of that lunch break, because that's a really good time, because that's often when I'm like most accelerated, is like middle of the day, or the other time would be right at the end of the day. Because often I start out the morning pretty chill and, meditate at good intentions. It's normally by lunch that's kind of speed is going.
I've geared up. Yeah. Great. Yeah. So there's two things. There's on an ongoing basis, just notice when you're ramping, right? That's what I heard you say. The second is really devoting time to attend to this part of you that's really wanting to be attended to in a focused way. So great.
Yeah.
And if you could give it 5 minutes at lunch, then you may decide that, you know what, I want to give it 5.5 minutes or 7 or 3. And
I think I do it pretty organically. I think that's part of this, otherwise it just becomes another thing to be busy with,
Right, exactly. That's the trap. Yeah. Okay,
thanks, man. Well, let's leave it there. I feel like, I was on a bit of an edge there in kind of public, and at some point my body kind of pulled back a little bit. And I know you're used to doing these corporate jobs where you have to do coaching while you're being assessed, and it's kind of sucks doing coaching in public because you don't get the same level of trust, which leads to the same level of depth, right? So I just want to say to you, well done for taking the challenge.
Absolutely. And here's the thing. Anytime I get to a place where somebody wants to back off, I'm good with that. That's my job. And it's like, my job is not to push them over the edge. My job is to bring them to the edge, right? And then invite them if they want to go, and if it's appropriate to go. And in this case, my assessment is that we got to an edge, and we're in a very public format, and it was like, yeah, we're going to leave it there. That's good. Yeah. But now you have, the work. You're adept enough to be able to take this work and develop it further. So I'm really excited to hear, what comes out of this.
Yeah, and I also just want to identify, to listeners as well, that most of my business clients wouldn't be able to identify as easily some of the somatic sensations and kind of, having the language for it. Like you can take a while to kind of train people a little bit in some of those skills, right?
Absolutely. That's all part of the process. And that's where coaching and teaching and counseling and all kind of gets, it's not like you're never teaching as a coach, for me anyway.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of whatever works for the client.
Yeah.
So I'm going to use it.
Yeah, same. And that for me was a lot like Paul Linden's following the body, or kind of focusing, the feeling into the body. And I know you've done some somatic experiencing, that idea of kind of titrating, being not on the edge, but still making sure there's enough, like good therapy, there needs to be the trust and the safety in the relationship, right? And if that's not in place, like me and you have loads of good trust and relationship. There's a lot of, I give you a lot of authority that I don't with everyone. So that's on the positive. And then on the negative is the fact that it's a fucking public forum. And I'm probably not going to burst out into tears, which I could have done at one point, just because, I don't know, I'm not sure I want to go there, And it's today in this space. So I feel like it's worth highlighting that that's a feature of any good coaching and training, I would say, is there enough authority? Is there a firm enough container? Is there enough kind of trust, and the person feels okay to continue?
Sure. In Newfield, the language that they use is, will the coachee constitute you as their coach? It's like, I can't be a coach unless you give me that authority.
Yeah.
And you did. And that's another key criteria for a coaching client is, do I have a sense that this person is actually going to grant me the authority?
Yeah, they're coachable. Like I always say, like the HR managers, I say, look, if you send John to me, then I'm not going to be able to work with him, because he's not going to give me any authority, even if he has to be in the room because he doesn't want to get fired. I say, like, he has to want this, and I actually like the client to make the first move, picking up the phone, and it's, I feel like that of being coachable and granting authority is absolutely huge. And that piece can really be missing in the corporate world, where someone's job's at stake. So they haven't really given you trust. You know what I mean? They just have to be there.
Yeah, I do. And I totally agree about, you need to educate people on what they're feeling in their bodies. And it reminds me of a client I had when I was first learning somatics, and I had to get some victims, to practice on. And my wife's best friend had just gone through brain surgery like a couple of months prior, and had moved from where she had lived for 25 years with her husband to a new place that they didn't like and was really uncomfortable. And she was really suffering a lot. And I asked her if she'd be willing to be one of my guinea pigs, and she said, absolutely. And I was trying to create distinctions for her somatically. And we were outside, and it was really difficult. And then finally, I actually saw that there was sunshine on one half of her face, and there wasn't any sunshine on the other half. And so I asked her, I said, so I'll give you an idea of what I mean by sensations in your body. Can you feel any difference between the right-hand side of your face and the left-hand side of your face? And as simple as that sounds, like, it cracked open a whole territory for her that had never been available to her before. And it just, from that place, transformed her life. And she and her husband said, you know what? Fuck this. We're out of here. Neither one of us like this place. Even though we just bought it, we're moving back.
Wow. I realize. I feel like when people aren't in touch with their bodies, they're not aware of what they love, what turns them on, on all levels. What their values are even. They become very manipulatable kind of politically, it's because they're not in touch with themselves. You know what I mean? That's a basic disconnect. And it's so much of the things in the world I see are problematic are related to that basic disconnect.
Amen. Yeah. The other piece I want your listeners to understand about somatic work, the somatic work that we just did, but somatic work in general, is you need to get specific. So when you're asking a client, what are you noticing in your body? And they say, well, I feel tense, let's just say.
Yeah.
Or I feel tight. And I go, so where do you feel this tightness? They go, all over.
Yeah.
I go, okay. So one of the ways I disarm them a little bit is like, so do you feel tight in your eyelashes?
Yeah.
You know,
earlobe. Okay, probably not. Okay, so where? So you got to get geographical about it, aren't you? Where do you? I like to reframe it in terms of responsibility as well. This is Paul Linden stuff. I'll say, where are you doing that? Where are you doing the anger or the tightness? And then they realize they have a choice at that point, right? You're kind of embedding the idea that's an action that they're doing. They're not a victim of the body. Well, man, listen, I need to go. I want to take a relaxed stroll to Aikido this evening. I feel like it's a nice evening, and after this coaching, a relaxed stroll would be a good way to get there. So I'm going to take my time. And in terms of we got a few minutes. Any terms, I'll share your website, of course. Any other resources that you think people should be available of? I'll share a couple of links to my YouTube channel of some sort of somatic coaching in action. Anything else you'd recommend linking to?
Yeah, so you've mentioned Stuart Heller, you've mentioned Paul Linden, you've mentioned Richard Strozz Heller. Those are the big three somatic guys that Wendy Palmer. Forgive me, Wendy. My maleness is showing here. She's also such a brilliant, and from a different perspective, it's so great to get her teachings. She gave me some great work to do with when I was working in a maximum security prison with prisoners, and some of the strategies that she came up with were just awesome. So highly recommend Wendy Palmer as well. So if you're curious about it, it's like there's the great books. You don't learn somatic coaching from books, but you can learn a lot. And if you're curious, then it'll perhaps spur you to, get in a dojo with somebody. To say nothing of, Mark Walsh's work in the UK.
I heard I heard the Embodied Facilitator course is excellent, and the book Working with the Body in Training and Coaching is excellent. But I'd certainly, all those names you mentioned, all of that. We've had Paul on the show. Wendy, we're trying to arrange. Stuart Heller, we're trying to arrange. All of those names are welcome if they do want to come on the podcast. I recommend all of those heartily. They all have different pros and cons, as does EFC. There's different systems that work for different people, but there's some good stuff out there now. I'd always just say to coaches as well, if coaches are listening to this who don't have an embodied practice, get an embodied practice. It doesn't matter what it is, a martial art, yoga, dance, just improv, just fucking find something that is embodied. Because I'm starting to see coaches teach embodied coaching who don't have an embodied practice, and that breaks my heart. Do you know what I mean? It used to be, that was never the case. And, it doesn't have to be super athletic or anything. But so I just encourage any coaches listening to just do anything with their bodies, because it's just going to create the base skill sets, which you can then pass on to a client. These skill sets like awareness, the breath that you were talking about and things like this. Yeah. Cool, man. So I'm going to go. That was wonderful. Curtis, lovely to see you as ever, sir. Thank you. I managed to blag some pre-coaching there. So that was good. Very much appreciate your time.
It's great spending time with you, Mark.
If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to get more. If you'd like to help us build the Embodied Tribe, leave a review on iTunes or share this on your social media. If you're interested in training globally, sign up to receive the newsletter at embodiedfacilitator.com. Until next time, welcome home to the body.